Hey there guys, in this tutorial I'm going to be teaching you how we can do some cool After Effects UI visuals. So earlier today I uploaded a couple photos to my Facebook page and we'll quickly take a look at these here. We did some cool little animated graphics all done in After Effects. So you can see they're quite detailed there, and if we scroll through we've got a couple more. That's the same one, just different area. And then we can also go ahead and add it into a 3D scene within After Effects and create this really cool high-tech, glossy kind of looking scene. So this is a very quick tutorial. Let's go into After Effects and get started. So in Adobe After Effects here, we're going to go to Composition, New Composition, and we're just going to create it to be 1000 by 1000, and we'll make it 10 seconds long, 25 frames per second. We'll hit OK. And we'll be left with this square composition. Now let's go ahead and create the base. So we'll grab a new solid and we'll call this circle, make it white, and we'll hit OK. Now what we can do on this layer, if we go to our effects and presets, just type in circle and we can actually generate a circle, and we'll double click that on our layer, and as easy as that we've got a circle, and now we're good to go, all done, sweet. Just kidding, let's go ahead and actually make this better. So we'll go to Effect, Transition, Linear, Radial Wipe. And you'll see what this effect does, it actually just kind of gives it a radial wipe, nice and simple. So what we can actually do here, we'll scroll forward just a little bit, set the transition completion up to 100%, we'll hit the stopwatch for a keyframe, we'll hit U on our solid to bring up our keyframes. And let's just scrub forward to maybe about 2 seconds and we'll put that down to 0. Now if we render this out, this is kind of all we've got. Not looking too great at the minute. So what we can do is highlight our keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant, and we can actually add an easy ease. Now these are really important in stuff like this, so if we actually do that and we'll hit our graph editor button here, and if we select our transition completion, you can actually see our curve and what is happening here. So to get a nicer effect, what I normally do is drag the last one and pull it in a bit, and drag the first one, pull it in a bit. Just so now it's going to be really easy and subtle at the first bit. It's going to go quick and then go ease out again. So if we render that out now, that's already looking a lot nicer, as you can see there. Sweet. Let's go into our circle effect and we'll come out of our graph editor, and what we can do is actually add an edge. So under edge we can select edge radius and we'll bring the radius up a bit, and you'll see now that's just actually going to create more of a ring for us. And if we render this out now, we've now got a cooler ring, and we can actually bring this up a little bit. Just that's quite thin, maybe 240. And really the overall concept of this tutorial is just building up of layers that are basically the same, where you can duplicate a whole bunch of layers, move them around subtly, and you kind of create a nice overall effect. So let's just collapse these down. We'll hit our circle, we can do Control or Command D just to duplicate the layer. We'll hit U again on the keyframes, and let's actually just highlight these and offset them a little bit. And we can hit S on this layer to bring up our scale, and we can actually drag the scale down, and you see now we've just sort of doubled the effect up there, and this is kind of what we're going for. Cool, so let's actually add a few more. We can maybe play around with this one, have a smaller radius, hit Control D, hit U, we can offset our keyframes. And let's actually have this one on the outside. And what you can do is click on the number, and you can use up and down keys to go one at a time. Now if I actually click on this solid and hit R, we can bring up a rotation, and we can actually just rotate it around. And because we made it a square composition, it's all going to still fit nicely in there. And we'll close that down, hit U. Let's actually drop this down to half. Cool, so now you can see we're starting to build up our effects here. Just like that, that's cool. Let's actually also scrub through, we'll go to about 4 seconds maybe, we'll hit U, and we're going to transition this out as well. So if we go to our transition completion, and you can't hit the stopwatch again because that'll delete them, so if you want to add another keyframe, you can just go to this little square here, we'll hit that to add another keyframe, come forward a bit, I'm going to set this back up to 100. And again, we can go into our graph editor, make sure our transition completion is highlighted, and you can see we want to kind of match this general curve. So we'll drag this in, drag this in. Cool. That is what we're going for right there. Let's go ahead and do the same. So we'll hit U, scrub back, make sure to offset them a bit. Hit another keyframe, scrub forward, and we'll put this on 100. And again, go into the graph editor and we can just actually, and if you hold shift while you do this, it's going to keep it nice and straight. Cool. Finally, we'll do the same to our last one here. Add a keyframe, scrub forward, 100, graph editor, and let's drag these out. So if we render this out now, cool, so that's just kind of like a quick basis of what we're going to be doing. But the one thing we want to do is really add some nice detail into this. So let's go ahead and start piling up some other cool little details. One thing I like to do, if we do layer, new solid, and we can just call this line. Okay, and let's grab the pen tool up here. And let's also turn on our title action safe. And what we can do is drag from the bottom left to the top right. And then let's add an effect under generate stroke. We can actually turn off our title action safe. And under paint style, let's add it to reveal original image. And you'll see, if we put this up to full, you're now going to see we've created a line across our image. And there's a bunch of settings in here that you can increase. So you can increase the brush size. Let's actually turn off our masks here so we can see a bit better. And another quick tip, if you do Control-Shift-H, you can hide all your layers in there. So that's quite a nice little tip. Cool, so we have this line. Let's hit S for scale and scale it down to maybe something like that. And let's go ahead and animate our end. So you'll see this is going to draw it on and off. So if we put the end down to 0%, we'll hit the stopwatch for a keyframe. We'll hit U on this layer to bring up the keyframes. Let's scrub forward and just bump this up to 100. And similarly with the circle, we can go ahead, right click these keyframes, change them to easy ease. And under our graph editor, we're going to do the same trick of just pulling this in and making it really drastic. So let's go have a look at that. Nice, we've got a line going across there. Cool, so let's duplicate our line there. We can also rotate it 45 or even 90. 90 with U. Go to our keyframes and just offset this a little bit. Maybe even make it a bit longer. Just so we can get a bit of variation in there and it doesn't look all the same. Cool. So now we're seeing getting these lines across there, which looks really nice. Sweet. What else can we do? Let's go ahead and have a look at some repeater options. So what we can do is layer, new shape layer. And you see that didn't actually change anything here, but we've now got a new layer. So we can go and click the little drop down. And under our contents, we can add a rectangle. And under our rectangle, if we actually solo this layer, you can't see anything because we need to add a fill. So we can go to our contents again, and we'll hit add, and let's add a fill. And immediately you'll see we've now got a red square in the middle with our composition, which doesn't look too good. So let's go ahead to our fill. Let's make it white, and let's go ahead and change the size. If you unlink it here, you can do it independently of each other. So we can actually add something like this maybe. again, you can go to add, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. So let's add round corners. And we'll hit the drop down. And now you see here, we can actually just round off the edge of our corners here. Now let's go for something like this. We'll move position of it up. Now to create a radial effect, we can go to add, repeater, and you'll see that's repeated it, but linearly. So we want to do it radially. So if we go to our repeater, we can drop it down, go to the transform options of our repeater, and let's change the rotation to 45. And the position needs to be 0. And you see that's only done quarter, so let's bump up our copies until it's all the way around there. Cool. We can unsolo that. And let's go ahead, kind of just play around with this size until we're getting something that we're happy with. Remember, little detail-y stuff looks a lot nicer, so try not to go overboard with size. Something like that looks quite nice. And let's go to our repeater. And you can also play around with these other options, so you can scale them up and down, so you can have them sort of cascading in, which is always a nice effect. Let's go to earlier on. You can actually also play around with these. Cool. So let's keyframe our copies. We'll set it to 0. We'll drag that back, right click, and we can do easy ease. Let's just scrub forward again and add 8 copies so they're all lined up nicely there. And actually our lines are intersecting them, so hit R on the shape layer and we can just offset it there, just so we can see them. And you'll see now when we play this through, they're just going to come on one by one, just like that. And let's actually make that a little bit quicker. Cool. So now we're really starting to get some detail in there. Let's add another shape layer, hit Ctrl D, hit U, and we can offset this, maybe make it quicker. And let's go to Effect, Generate Fill. We can add a nice black fill to it. We can hit S on this layer, and then we can drag it up. And we can actually start to take bites out of this other layer, as you can see here. So let's actually go under here, and we can increase our copies under the contents, repeater, and under this keyframe. Make sure you're over the top of this keyframe. We can just increase the number of copies to maybe 20. And under the repeater transform, make sure the rotation's just offset a little bit. And now you can create some really cool looking stuff here. Just go ahead and play around with it till you're getting something you're happy with. So that looks quite nice. Let's go ahead and render that out, see what we're getting. Nice. Cool. Let's just keep going. Let's add more. Let's hit Ctrl D for this one. We can scale this one down. And we can make it white again under, actually let's just delete our fill so it's white. And these ones, let's make more kind of circles rather than actual lines. So under our rectangle path, under our size, let's just drag these all the way down here. And you'll see if you match 6 and 6, or make sure these two values are the same, you're going to start to get dots. So now this is kind of looking cool. We'll hit U. And let's actually turn this off. We don't want the keyframes for that. But what we can do another transition on is if we hit T on this layer, let's keyframe the opacity to kind of flicker on. So we'll hit the stopwatch and we'll make it 0. And if you use the page down, that's 1 frame forward. And let's drag this up to 100. We'll hit page down again. Drag that down, page down again. Drag that up, drag down. Let's do it one more time. Drag down, page down again. So now we've just gone from 100 to 0 about 5 times. So let's highlight these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant. Oh, actually, let's go to keyframe interpolation, and we'll change this to hold, and we'll hit OK, and you'll see that's going to update your keyframes. So now if we actually play this through, you're going to see our dots are actually going to flicker on there. Let's kind of loop this. So you see them flickering on, which looks really, really cool in the final effect. Cool. So let's undo that. Control D again on our shape layer, and we can play around with the opacity, maybe make some up here. So that's looking cool. Let's go to our contents and under our repeater. Let's maybe make 8 copies here. And we can just play around with this. Cool. Hit U, we can offset the keyframes by dragging them. So that's looking quite nice. Now another cool thing you can do, if we hit Control D on our top shape layer, and let's actually solo this for now so we can see what we're looking at. If we drop this down, go to Contents, Rectangle Path, let's actually make a longer one. So if we do something like this, and if we go to our repeater and our transform on our repeater, let's change the rotation to 45, and that's just going to make it nice and even. Play around with this again so we can actually create something like this, which looks quite cool. So let's unsolo that, and actually let's also bring the size down of this, and we can kind of make that nice and thin. We'll hit S on this layer, and we can drag that in a little bit. So now we're creating this, and really all you want to do is just go in, play around with each setting, make sure everyone's a little bit different, and then just duplicate it again, play around with the scale. We can have one up here. Looking quite cool. Let's offset it a bit, let's go back to 0. So that's looking really cool. And we actually need to, well, they kind of flicker on. If we hit U, these can flicker on a little bit later. So this is looking pretty cool. So make sure you go ahead and save it there. And let's just keep going. Let's add a little bit more. One thing I did in my previous example, so you'll see here we've got this kind of nice grid layer happening in the background. I'm not sure if you can see that, but the dashes just going on there. Let's go ahead into After Effects and try and recreate that. So one easy way to do that is if we go to Layer, New, Solid. Actually, let's go to Layer, New, Shape Layer. And under the shape layer, let's add a rectangle there. And again, remember to add the fill so you can see your rectangle. And under our path, let's change the size and make sure to unlink it. We can make it really thin there. And then also very long. And let's just change our fill to white. So to get it to repeat, obviously we go to Add and we'll use the repeater. Under the repeater options and the transform, let's change the position, not on X, but we can actually change it on Y. And you'll see if we drag that value, it's going to repeat in the Y axis, and we can add the number of copies, so let's keep adding them. And then we can also change the scale. So if we drag that down, you see it's going to get smaller and smaller the further it goes back. So what we can do here is if we go to our rectangle path and make sure those are really long there, just so it's not getting cut off right. And let's just play around with our repeater a bit more. Let's bring the position down and the number of copies up, and the scale, maybe let's not do that too much, but just a little bit there. Cool. Next, what we can do is, I think, if we go to add and trim path, and we'll drop that down, what you can do is actually just kind of cut off the edges of them here. So you'll see that's going to be a harsher look. Let's just get something that fades off towards the edges there. Cool, so let's drop this back down. We'll hit Control D, we'll hit R, and we can just change this to 180, and you'll see it's going to flip over there. And now we're creating this cool grid kind of effect. And what we can actually do is we'll select the two, we'll go to Layer, Pre-Compose, and we'll call this, let's call it Lines, and we'll hit OK. And now let's just make a mask. And if you hit Control and Shift at the same time, you can grab a circle from the middle, hold down space to move. And let's just kind of match the center of our sphere here. So that's pretty good there. Wait, T, maybe bring this down to 70%. Cool, and we can actually go into this and see these here, so we can also color these if we want. Let's go to our fill, maybe make a nice greeny blue color. Okay, back to our previous comp, and you'll see now we're getting some color in there, looking really, really cool. And let's also animate these on, so we can hit T. We'll go to maybe just after 2 seconds, we'll hit your stopwatch, make sure it's 0, and we'll go forward 1 frame up to 70, page down again. To go forward 1 frame, we'll hit 7 to 0, page down again, back up to 70. And if we just hit B to bring in our composition here, and let's just render that out so quickly, you'll see now it kind of just flickers on there, looking very, very cool. So let's quickly go ahead and look at our preview animation here. Nice, so we're getting some cool stuff going on there, and even at the end it looks pretty cool. Even though we haven't transitioned all of our elements out, we're going to be left with this really cool looking effect. So let's just quickly add some few more detail-y things. Let's duplicate this shape 4 layer, drag it to the top, hit S, and let's just drag that out until the end there. And let's bring this down to our contents, rectangle path. We'll uncheck the uniform button, and let's actually make these quite thin, and we'll also make them very long there, just so we can get some outside edge. Remember, Control Shift H hides everything, just so you can get a nicer sort of look. And we can also, that's looking pretty cool. Let's go to our repeater. Let's add a couple more copies there. And under the transform, let's offset our rotation. Cool. Maybe actually make these a little bit thinner. Something more like this. It's looking very, very cool. Cool. One final thing I wanted to add was these really nice uniform lines here, which just add a lot of detail to it. So let's go quickly add those. Go to Layer, New Solid, make sure it's white. And like we did with the lines, let's grab the pen tool and we'll turn on our title action save. and we just drag from corner to corner there. Go to Effect, Generate Stroke, and paint style is going to be Reveal Original Image, and let's turn off this, Control Shift H. You'll see now we've again created another line across there. So let's scrub back a bit here. And let's go ahead and keyframe our end. We'll set it to 0. We'll hit U on this layer. You see our keyframe there. Let's just drag it forward and drag this up to 100. Now at the same time, let's go just after our first keyframe here. So let's go forward a few frames. And let's keyframe the start as well, which should be on 0. We'll drag, and just after our last keyframe again, we'll put it down to 100. So if we solo this layer, and we'll hit U, you can see our keyframes here. Hit B to render just from here, and you'll see that's actually just going to make a line shoot across like that. Now the further you drag these two apart, the longer the line's going to be. Now let's drag it even more. So something like that looks good. Let's highlight all of these keyframes, right click, keyframe assistant and easy ease. And again, let's go to our graph editor and let's do our trick with these. Let's drag these two up. We'll highlight the bottom two, drag these in. And render that out now. You'll see we're getting this really cool looking effect. Just like that. Cool. So let's come out of our graph editor there. We'll unsolo. And you'll see now that line is just going to go across our composition at the bottom there. And we'll hit S on here. Let's scale it down. And let's also hit R, and we can just rotate this around. We'll zoom in here. And if we render this out with everything else, you'll see our line's coming across there and then goes back out again. So you see that there? Very nice. But now we've got one, we want to go ahead and do it to a whole bunch of them. So easiest way I found to do this and have them offset was literally just to Control D or R. And let's click this value, hold Control and click up and down changes it. And actually if you hold Shift, it does it by 10% increments. So what you can do is hold Shift, click down, and let's offset that there just by dragging it across, just like that. Now if we grab these first two, we'll hit Control D, drag those to the top, hit R on the keyboard, and again, now you can just go around. And actually, let's scrub forward. You see now if we click our rotation values, this is just going to offset all of them there. So that's maybe something about here. Close those down. Now we can do the first four. Control D. Move those up. So let's do that again. Move those up. And remember to just offset these one by one, just like that. Hit R again. Hold Shift and offset them. And now you see we're starting to create these cool lines going across the middle there. And again, let's go to the first one, top one, just by holding Shift and clicking the bottom, clicking the top. And let's do Control D, drag those up, hit R on the keyboard. And I actually want to kind of fill in the blank spaces here, so let's just offset those in there. And let's do the same again. Hit the first one, hit the bottom one. Let's actually do it again. Hit the first one, scroll up, hit the bottom one. Sorry, hit the top one. Control D. On the keyboard. And you see now we're just sort of filling in these blank spaces here. So that was quite cool. And let's offset those as well. Now it's getting a little bit messy, so if we grab our top line and grab the bottom line, holding Shift, and we can do Layer, Pre-Compose, and we'll just call this Lines again. So we've got those all pre-composed. Now if you want to keep going, you can just duplicate the pre-comp, with Control D, hit R on the pre-comp, and now you can just keep going and add in as many as you like. So we can maybe rotate these here, and we can also hit S and scale these down or up. So let's maybe scale those down here and take a look at what we've got here. Looking really cool. So I think that will do for the UI bit. So let's go ahead, click any layer. You can do Control or Command A. It's going to highlight everything, and we'll do Layer, Pre-Compose, and we'll just call this UI Elements. And we'll hit Enter. Let's drag down. So now we just have our UI elements, and you'll see that's all alpha channeled there. So let's go ahead and get into the 3D compositing side. So we'll go to Composition, New Composition, and let's make this 1920 by 1080, and we'll hit OK. We'll go to our project, and we can drag in our UI elements comp, and you'll see when we scroll through, that's just going to play nicely there. Looking very, very cool. So let's go ahead and start building the scene. Let's go to Layer, New Solid. We'll call this Floor. We'll make it a nice sort of dark blue layer. We'll hit OK, OK. We'll drag that under. And let's make both of these a 3D layer using the little cube symbol there. And actually, let's just make that a little bit darker, maybe something like that. Cool. And actually, our floor, we can leave that unchecked and don't make that 3D. But what you can do is hit the floor, we'll do Control D, go to Layer, Solid Settings, and let's rename this to Grid. And then that layer we can make 3D. Now if we go to our effects and presets, we can search for Grid. And if we go to Generate a Grid, we'll drag that onto there. And it does what it says, it makes a grid. So let's change the size from corner point to width slider. And this is just going to let you control the size of the grid basically. So let's maybe make it about 70. Cool. And we can change the border to make it thinner. So maybe 3 is a good call there. Nice. Let's go to Layer, New, and add our camera. And if you hit R on the camera, we can actually see, you can go ahead and play around with these values to get some rotation in there. Now let's actually rotate this off. Also, you can hit C on the keyboard to scroll through. So if you hit C again, you can go to zoom. C again, we'll get the rotate. And let's just try to find a nice angle for this UI design. So maybe something like that's looking very, very cool. And let's hit S on our grid, and let's just scale it up so it covers most of the scene. Now let's go ahead and make it a bit more 3D. So let's go to our UI elements, we'll hit P, and we can actually just drag this up using the third value, the Z value here. So we can just drag that up a little bit. We'll go to our grid and we'll hit T for opacity, and we can just fade that down a little bit. And let's actually duplicate our UI elements, comp layer, and we'll hit Control D. We'll hit Enter, and we can call this reflection. We'll put it under the UI elements, hit P, and then this is where you can just drag it down here and just kind of make it actually a bit more 3D. So if we drag it down there, we'll hit T for opacity, and you can just fade that down a little bit. We'll go back to the position. We can actually just make sure that this looks like a nice glossy reflection. If we go to our main UI elements, we'll change the transfer mode to add, and we'll do the same with reflection there. We'll go and add that. So that's looking quite cool. Now let's actually add some cool depth. So if we go to our UI elements, we'll hit Control D, and on the bottom layer, let's hit P. And let's just move that down ever so slightly. Again, you can click on here, use the up and down arrow keys, just like that. And on this layer, let's add an effect, generate a fill. And let's just make maybe a sort of dark blue kind of fill there. and go back to our position. You can just kind of play around with this and give it more depth. So that's looking pretty cool. So let's scrub through here. See, it comes on very nicely. Got our nice lines happening. So let's add some depth of field. If we drop down our camera, we'll close the transform and go to camera options. And let's just turn on depth of field there. And you see that's gonna maybe not do so much. So what you can do is go to our focus distance and just drag this down until it's coming in focus there. You can play around with the aperture. So if we actually increase this, it's going to get a lot blurrier, and that just kind of narrows the focus field. So let's drag this down again and keep dragging the focus distance down until it starts to come into focus there. So that's looking nice. Let's actually increase our aperture again. And you see, if you watch over here, it just adds some really nice depth of field. Again, let's drag down the focus distance. Almost there. Just so it's in the center. And you see now we're getting this really awesome looking effect. Cool. So what else we can do? We can duplicate our main top layer. Control D, hit P on the position. And what we can do here is we can actually just slide it along and make another one. Let's drop this down to maybe half. We just slide this along, and again we can duplicate that and rename this one to reflection. Hit P on the keyboard and you can just drop that down and hit T. Cool, so now we're getting some nice reflection. Maybe drop the opacity down to about 25%. And with both these guys selected, you can actually just offset them. And that's going to give it a whole new look to this one, just so it doesn't look too repeated. So we can drag that forward. So now we're creating something really nice. So let's add a new adjustment there. Go to Effect, Color Correction, Curves, and we can just start grading this a little bit. So we'll bring it to give an S sort of curve. Let's go to our blue channel, maybe shove that up a little bit. Go back to RGB, maybe not so dark. And if you always bring this one up just a little bit, just so the blacks are a little bit grey, I think always adds a nice little touch to it. Remember to save. Let's rename this to grade. And we can also add some nice glow effects. So we'll increase our radius up. And just drop our intensity down to maybe 0.3, just so it's not too overpowering. Just a nice little touch there. To make it more cinematic, you can go to Layer, New Solid, and add a letterbox. So we'll rename that. We'll make it a completely black layer. Let's bring up our title action safe with this symbol here, and let's grab a rectangle mask tool by holding down on this layer. And you can actually just line it up with the top and bottom as best you can. Cool. Let's turn off our action safe again, and under our mask let's change it to subtract, and we can just close that down. And now you'll see we're creating this really cool UI interface here, which is looking pretty damn cool. And again, you can always go back into your main layer here, and I've noticed this is quite thick and it's actually really bright around here, so we can kind of break that up a little bit. So let's go into our UI elements here. We'll find that layer, so I think it might be this one. Cool. And what we can do actually is add a noise and grain fractal noise, and that's going to give it some fractal noise. Let's increase the contrast. Maybe even bring the brightness down there. And if you see, if we go back to our main comp, it's just going to add a little bit more variation into that. Maybe increase the complexity. We'll tone down the contrast just a little bit there. That looks nice. Let's duplicate this layer with Control D. And let's just close those down. And on this layer, let's actually add an effect, generate a fill. Let's add a nice warm orangey fill. And under our circle, if we go to our edge radius, you can actually just bring that up and go to feather. And you can feather the inner edge. And if we add it to this layer, and go back to our main comp, now you'll see we're getting this sort of warm orangey glow on the outside there. Let's go back to our fractal layer and let's tone that down just a little bit. Cool. We'll grab our orange layer again. Let's do Control D or S on the keyboard. And we can just scale this in and make some really cool looking stuff. Let's also grab this layer again. We'll hit Control D, go to Effect, generate a fill, and make it black. And we can actually just play around with our edge radius and bring that in. And you see that's just going to cut it up a little bit and make it a little bit more varied right there. And let's bring it above that layer. We'll hit S on the keyboard and scale it up. Just because I want it to be a little bit more broken up and not so bright. So if we go back here now, there we go. Now we're sort of breaking up the light and it's not going to be too overpowering. And we've got this nice little shockwave going on in the middle here, which looks really awesome. And that right there, even that's just looking very, very cool. So let's add this to full. And I mean, this really is looking very, very cool. So let's go ahead and start adding a bit of camera animation. If we select our camera, we'll just drop this down and we can go to our transform and our position here. If we hit Alt and hold it down and click the stopwatch, that lets you type an expression in. And the expression we're going to type in is wiggle, open bracket, let's do a value of 10, comma 5 maybe, and we'll close bracket. And actually for now, let's if we just speed this up by we'll go to our camera options and we'll just turn off the depth of field there. And if we quickly RAM preview this, now you're going to see we're going to get a little bit of camera animation. Let's drop it down to third. Cool, so let's quickly play this through. You'll see that's very, very shaky. So what we can actually do is drop down our position and we can just change this. Now I always get this mixed up, but I think the first value is the frequency and the second value is the amount. Am I right or am I wrong? Okay, so yeah, first one is the frequency. So let's turn that down to maybe 0.5, and the second one's the amount. So let's maybe crank that up and get a really large position going on. Now we're getting some really awesome kind of handheld camera movement there as our UI comes on and it lights up the screen. That's really cool. So that is looking pretty damn awesome. Sweet. Cool. Let's go ahead and turn our depth of field back on. We can just work on the look a little bit more. Depth of field on. Let's go to our grade, effect, color correction, and let's work on our color balance. So let's add a bit of shadow to the blue. Maybe about 5. Our highlighted blue, we can add maybe 10. I really want this to be a nice cold technology sort of look. So that's looking very cool. Might actually go to our UI elements again and our lines in the middle. I'm going to actually change these to maybe a red warm orange. Something like that. And actually if we drop these down, go to our contents, rectangle path, I'm going to even make them a little bit thinner just so they're not too in your face, and we'll do the same with the other one. Just so they're a little bit more subtle there. And go back to our main comp 2. There we go, that's looking a lot nicer. So there's very subtle but it really does add to the whole look of it there. So make sure to save. That is looking pretty damn awesome. One final thing I'll do, let's highlight it all apart from the letterbox, and we'll pre-compose this. And we can just call it flattened, I guess. Hit enter. That's just going to quickly update there. So let's go to Effect, Color Correction, Levels, Individual Controls, and add it to our new flattened pre-composed layer. And what we can do is call this blue. We'll duplicate it with Control G, we'll call this green. Duplicate it again and call it red. And what I'm doing now is just separating each color channel out, just so we can do some chromatic aberration there. So we'll go to red, and under the levels we can drop down blue and green, and the blue output white we can drop to 0, and the green output white we can drop to 0. And you'll see there, now we've just soloed out our red channel. So we can turn that off, and let's do the same with our green. So we'll go to blue and red, and we'll turn those off. So now we have green, we'll turn that one off, and let's go finally do it to blue. So we'll go to our green and red channels and turn those two off. So we're left with blue. Now to pre-compose these all together, if we change the transfer mode to screen on the top two layers, you'll see it's gone right back to the way it was before. Now all you have to do is select any layer you want, and you'll be able to just offset that, and you can get this really awesome looking effect there. Just like that. So if we select our red and use the arrow keys there, you can just kind of offset it to the left and right. Go to our blue channel, and let's just offset that. And now it might be hard to see, but we're getting this kind of chromatic abrasion look there. You can sort of see it happening. Just a nice subtle effect, but it really does add to it. So let's scrub through, what else are we looking at here? Got these really nice lines happening, and even the end frame. If we have a look at that, we're left with this really awesome geometry here. So let's just use the quick power of editing here, and we can add some cool sound design to it. So obviously I've kind of rushed through this a little bit, as I didn't really want a 15-hour tutorial on my channel. But either way, if you spend a little bit more time, you can put a little bit more detail into it, and you can actually make it look really nice in the final result. But other than that, the After Effects project file is available for download in the link description. I hope you enjoyed the tutorial, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye guys.